Hello my friends and welcome back. I'm Chisco Gaming, and in this video I'm going to help you make the best legendary commander investments possible in Rise of Kingdoms based on my experience just battling against 365, the strongest kingdom in the game by Imperium power. And not only that, but I used Expertise Ragnar Prime, so this is first-hand experience. I also am a leadership enjoyer, so I'm going to share with you my thoughts about the upcoming Philip, the two new ranged commanders, and there is a lot to talk about because my friends, AoE damage is looking better than ever. But before we do all of that, allow me to thank the sponsor of today's video. Today's video is sponsored by Star Trek Fleet Command. It's very similar to the city building war games that you know and love from this channel, but it's set in space in the iconic Star Trek universe. You'll recruit legendary characters, crew iconic ships, and go on missions into the unknown to boldly go where no one has gone before. This includes global battles, forming massive alliances, and of course, farming or plundering lots of resources to build up and upgrade your fleet. And now's the perfect time to get started in Star Trek Fleet Command as they're celebrating their 6th anniversary and have an exciting Q Continuum event with a ton of rewards. Star Trek Fleet Command is available on PC and mobile, so be sure to scan the QR code on screen or use the link in the description to download for free and start playing on the platform of your choice. But there's more. Use the redemption code on screen. It's Crushers to get a full 2 officer unlocks and a full unlock of the jellyfish for free once you hit Ops Center 18. The promo runs now through January 15th, and the associated jellyfish bundle is live until 7 days after, and it includes Beverly Crusher full unlock, Wesley Crusher full unlock, and the jellyfish that's after you hit Op Center 18. Use my link in the description and scan the QR code on screen to download. The galaxy needs a leader. Will you answer the call? All right, friends, if you're new to this list, this is an investment tier list. If you put sculptures in today, my goal is that you will get value for 3 or 4 years, ideally, right? And you've got commanders on here like Skippy Prime, you've got Nevsky, you've got Joan. This has been the case. You get that kind of value. Other commanders, I try to help you avoid because they fade from the meta that includes commanders like Sargon. And I would love to see some of these commanders, in fact, many of these commanders in the just know category see renewed relevance, like we have seen for some commanders like Alexander the Great, but I'm not going to hold my breath. But what I am excited about is that there's good news here, okay? I make this list to help you predict, but the developers themselves have said, hey, we're going to help you predict what's coming next. I talked about this in a prior video, so I won't go too in depth here. I will simply mention the developers have said they will give us a little bit more information about what's potentially coming and more predictability to whether or not it's single target or AoE. They said they're going to give us a little more predictability. So I'm very much looking forward to that. And it's very needed because you've got this like new direction they're going with commanders. Like, I've got the mouse on Shajar here and CY, where they're healing archers. And so when they show up in game, people are like, wait, so I got to go work on new armaments for a different formation. I don't even know if the next cycle is going to be for healing or if this is a one-off thing. What am I supposed to do? And you could guess that maybe we'll get more healing archers, but you don't know. Well, that's a big commitment and trust that you're going to get more of that in the future. And it worked out for Smite, but it could easily not, where, like, for example, for Trajan, if you invested in open field leadership for years, you were left kind of wondering, will we get something else or not, right? And so I'm very hyped about that predictability. But let me tell you one thing that we don't have to predict anymore. We don't have to guess. And that is about Ragnar Prime. Is he good? Yes. He's insane. Ragnar Prime, we can pull all the way up here, and I think he might be one of the very best commanders in the game. Certainly, he is one of the very safest commanders to invest in the open field in the game, because I don't know if we're going to always be getting more infantry skill damage. To the point I made about predictability, is it going to be Smite or is it going to be skill damage? He is very, very strong. And I would say still Liu Che rates is the best investment in the game right now. That March just is so performant for me. And the reason is pretty obvious. I mean, even if that march is getting swarmed, because it's all about normal attack damage, the swarmers get not wrecked, but like punished. And so if they don't hit you, you absolutely decimate. If they do hit you, you're fine. You still end up decent in those trades. And Ragnar Prime ends up all the way up here because his AoE damage is just insane. Which brings us to AoE damage and the state of archers, and specifically Shajar. And the last time I made this list, I said, look, the reason you would pick Shajar and the reason we bumped Ashurbanipal down from an investment standpoint is if you believe that the future of archers is going to be more emphasis on this like healing true damage combination and mechanic, right? And William Wallace is sort of like the Shajar equivalent for Smite infantry, and he's a part of the best combo. So if we're just waiting to get some open field true damage AoE archer, then Shajar sits here and looks pretty good. But let me tell you about how she actually performed for me, which is that I took my Ashurbanipal and Shajar and I paired them up with Shajar as the primary, so a big skill damage focus, and I ended up benching her. I benched her for the cavalry, and I used Huo with William, and I used Nevsky with Joan. And my ability to assess for you the archers is in kind of a funny place, because as it turns out, it's not the first time 365 has done this, but they were marking my marches every time I left my city. So it's funny because despite their marking my marches, I still ended up, for most of the pass opening, in that like top 10 for kill points, right? Until I went to bed. After I went to bed and the second and third day, there was no reason to field fight in this pass opening. It was over. We set up our fort wall. If you wanted to KP chase, you could KP chase. I didn't think it was necessary at all. In fact, it was completely unnecessary. So while I was awake and active, I crested at like top 5 and I stayed top 10 despite the fact that they were focus targeting me. But it makes it very hard for me to assess to you how well my archers are doing because like they were the primary focus target. And it's funny because Chadsky came on the channel and he was saying before like, yeah, you know, archers, they just get focused out, and it's true. Even my Zhuge Liang with Hermann Prime, which is a very strong combination and normally would perform well, was kind of getting dumpstered. And dumpstered in this case means trading even. But like, compared to my other marches, it was doing the worst. And like, okay, yeah, if they mark it every time I leave my city, it is going to do the worst. But I'm mentioning this because it's not uncommon for archers to get focused. Now that dot mode lets you pick the troop type you're gonna see and you can actually focus troop types, archers are getting rolled. And I found, first of all, that AoE damage was better than single target damage. In other words, when I took Shajar and I swapped her out, I used Ashurbanipal with Nebu, I used Ashurbanipal with Esong. Both of those, amazingly, did better than when I had Shajar. Now, Shajar is a goat in Canyon. She's absolutely god tier. But I'm telling you all of this because I think Shajar still remains a speculatory investment where only the real value will be realized down the road. Down the road when we get some AoE damage dealer. In fact, AoE damage was so good that I turned around to Cortex and Chadsky and I said, hey, I'm finding that William is absolutely insane right now. Enemies are so stacked up on top of each other that I'm landing my weird rectangle AoE. I'm getting rage for the team. I'm getting defense for the team. All AoE damage is absolutely amazing. And I got a lot of pushback there, right? They're like, oh man, this commander's so old, blah, blah, blah. No way. I know you just want William to be good. And I'm like, bro, the reports are just better. Like, just try it. And Cortex said, okay, so if you're telling me AoE damage is better than single target damage, I'm going to swap out my Nevsky and use XY. And I was like, man, I don't know if I go that far. And he's like, well, 365 is doing it. And I thought that was kind of an interesting observation. Either you assume that the strongest kingdom by Imperium power in the game either doesn't have the depth of roster to run the meta, or you assume they're onto something and they know something and they've actually done something smart. So if they're doing it, he's like, all right, I'll try it. And what did he find? AoE damage is the way. And he streamed it. So like, you can go see. You don't have to take my word for it. But what I will say is that when I took my Ash and Shajar march, and I benched them, and I brought in the Nevsky Joan instead, and I swapped out, I was using Joan, I think, with Huo, and I started using Huo William. Man, I just started doing way better. So I'm mentioning all of this because cavalry is in a weird spot, and I want to advise to you, like, what's the role of cavalry in the future? Should you still put sculptures into Nevsky? Should you still put sculptures into Joan? The beauty of these two is that they only require a small amount of sculptures to start to deliver you some really meaningful value, but cavalry are in a weird spot. We're about to get a leadership release, and both of these do not do AoE damage, only the Joan does, right? I think these are still very, very safe investments. I think you could do Huo instead, but I think the popular opinion would be that Nevsky and Joan would be the safest two cavalry to pick if you're going to focus on cavalry right now and you're not going to wait the 3.5 months it's going to take before we get new cavalry. And I do think we are going to get new cavalry in 3.5 months. I think they're going to have the combo mechanic as their sort of key mechanic, but that's all sort of deep speculation. I will say that if what you care about is Canyon, the thing that people are using there is the Huo with Nevsky. But the weirdness here is that, look, man, it's all about the AoE damage, okay? And I think this Nevsky Joan combo still is just absolutely slapping in the open field. It's doing exactly what I wanted it to do. So all of that to say, I think these commanders stay where they are. Although I will say I am very anxious about archers for the open field. I think and hope that whatever the new commander is would make Shajar super relevant and would end up in this top tier and would bump down Zhuge Liang and Hermann Prime. But we're 6+ months away from that, so closer to that time, I will probably bump these guys down to low priority. But for the time being, if you had to pick, Chisco, I'm making 3 marches, give me the best 3 you can make in the game right now, I would say the best 3 you can make is William with Liu Che, it's going to be Ragnar with Skippy Prime, and it's going to be Zhuge Liang with Hermann Prime. That's what I'm going to tell you. Right there. Okay? And from there, I'd put a Cav March in, probably Nevsky Joan is where it's at. And then from there, Huo and William were just absolutely outstanding. Okay? Now, for those of you doubting the value of AoE damage, okay, let me just tell you about the interview that was done with Silent Flow. That's the king of 1093, one of the kings, when they won, what was it, Arc League this season? I think that's when that interview happened. And what he said is that they use Belly Prime in lane and William for the mid fights. So even they acknowledge when you're playing smaller skirmishes and swarming, a single target damage commander like Belly Prime is amazing. And when you go to mid and it's all about AoE damage, that's when you bring in big AoE commanders like William. So when you're investing in commanders in this game, and you see area of effect damage on a commander, and you potentially see versatility like we get with Ragnar Prime, yeah, I think he's a solid investment here, okay? Which brings us to the new commanders. Now, whether or not Philip is going to be good is, in my opinion, going to depend a lot on how committed you are to making him good. I think that if you're going to go Echelon, and you have leadership gear, so you can use him as the primary, I think he's going to be nuts. But that also gets a lot more value when you have 6 or 7 marches. He's going to be the GOAT in Canyon. I think he's going to be amazing for that. Realistically, though, most people maybe use him as a secondary and are not going to go for Echelon. So I think for most people, he's going to end up more like down here in low priority, where he's a commander that if you're newer to the game and after testing, we reveal he does well as a secondary. We still got to do that testing and see when he lands. But maybe he'll give you this really cool way of picking a commander that could be the secondary to a bunch of other commanders. And eventually maybe you make a leadership set or talent some stuff for leadership and maybe you use him as the primary. That's all a lot of maybes. But I think I can't put him higher than low priority until A, we see what he's up to, and B, the fact that you only really want him if you have lots of marches on the field. So if you're a newer player of the game, You could, again, make him and consider using him as a secondary, but even then, if you're using only 3 marches on the field, remember, he buffs 5, all right? And that's great. You're helping your team. That's lovely. At the end of the day, whether or not you stay in your kingdom depends on your kill points, presumably, if your kingdom tracks performance, which hopefully they do if they're going to stay relevant. So all that to say, I don't know that he's the guy to get that for you, right? So if you're just building up your roster, yeah, he's versatile, but I think you want just the hardest hitting, most impactful stuff. And I don't know that he's going to be it. I do think, again, he's the kind of commander that is going to scale in an insane way with all of the things working in his favor. Okay. So echelon, leadership gear, he's going to slap. Without that, I don't know that I'd say that it is. Okay. I don't think he's it. And when it comes to the new Siege, man, let me tell you, I mean, you either are using Siege or you aren't. Like one or the other. And most people aren't. But if you are, if I were starting today, I probably would just pick the new Siege and assume that those are the best ones and just pair them together and run with that. Some people would argue potentially that these last generation of Siege commanders are just so good that maybe they're the best. We'll do some testing and we'll see. In general, with Siege, like, I don't even think of it as an option for my 7th March. I'm all in on the field stuff, and even the leadership stuff is kind of the way to go. And, you know, look, like you can't reinforce a rally with Siege, so you can technically reinforce a garrison, but there's like no Siege garrison really, right? Like it's not a thing. So it's kind of an awkward troop to even have in your roster. So I think Siege can do very, very, very powerful things for obvious reasons. But for me, they continue to be a niche role thing. It's not a thing that everybody has to have. It's a thing that you can do if you want the play style and you know what you're doing. And I think you'll be very, very, very rewarded. But the role of this niche role category is to identify this kind of stuff. All right. The things that like could be good, and you need to know what you're deciding if you move in on that path. Now that does leave a couple commanders here where I don't think it's fair for me to leave them in this category any longer. Like, I think we can take Henry and we can bump him down to just no. Like, I don't think you should start that project for the open field as a free-to-play or low spender in 2024 going into 2025. Like, very obviously, that to me feels like a thing we don't need. And I've got some garrisons in here where if you know what you're doing and you're garrisoning, you know, you can like make these choices for your city, right? Are there other commanders I'd move around? I'm almost tempted to take Bobber and Margaret and say, like, why would you start these projects now when you could do any of these other projects instead? And I tend to lean in that direction of roll forward with the meta instead of investing in the past and hope that the developers move the direction in a game that sort of rewards you for investing in the present. So I'm kind of tempted to take Bobber and Margaret and just say, hey, you know what? Probably you got other Siege you could do as a prio. And I feel pretty safe in that move, right? And so that leaves Ash and Nebu here in this niche role category because, hey, if you're an Archer player or you want a second Archer March right now, like, yeah, the AoE damage is kind of where it's at. So if you want to be both speculatory and use something meta, I mean, I think the Shajar with Ash is the way to go. And if you have something else to use in the meantime, like Esong or, you know, Nebu, I think that might be more performant for you in the short term. Now, it's a little hard to say because, you know, Shajar is buffing other marches, but I still felt like that was kind of the case, okay? And if you were going for a second cavalry march, right, and you're like, well, Chisquel, man, I'm a cav player, like, what should I do? And you need something now and you're not waiting for the new combo calves, which I assume is a thing. I don't know for sure if it's combo, but that's my assumption. I mean, I think Huo is a safe bet as like what you might do if you're sort of reaching into the niche role category because you've already got these two kind of in a good spot, all right? And I think that covers it. Like, would I do Guan now? I personally will end up using Guan in the open field, but I've already got 4 infantry in here, which is kind of insane. Normally, that's against the rules. I don't do that. Man, I feel like I'm breaking my own rules here, but I think I'm just going to do it. Inf are just that good right now. They actually just are. They actually are just that good. Yeah. And they're just that dang good. Yep. We leave it there. So that's how I would land that up. Now, if you are a brand new player, I got good news for you. The developers have said they're going to let you do some sort of swap with a commander where all your sculptures in one and levels and stars switch to somebody else. We don't know the cost to go and do that yet. We don't know all the mechanics, but I do think that these before Season of Conquest investments still remain really good. And you may actually at this time be able to go work on Alex and then switch to something else if you wanted to, or go switch, you work on Esong and switch to something else. So we don't know the details of how that works. So we won't know the sort of commanders you can theoretically switch to and what you'll have access to. But I think it is promising enough that I would feel like the value of enjoying the early game, plus the potential of switching to something relevant later, plus the fact that Esong is doing pretty decent still and that Alex can be used with Liu Che. Like, I think all three of these commanders are great starting points right now. And day one maxing Minamoto, I think is, okay, day one. Well, whenever you get to that VIP level, maxing Minamoto before KVK Season 1 is still a very fine choice. He's not the best cavalry commander in the game, not by a long shot, but he is still super relevant for early game and can be used in late game until you get to something better, which your goal should be to get to something better as sort of quickly as you can. I do doubt that you'll be able to switch his sculptures to something else, so I want to caution you on that. I don't think you could buy Minamoto and then switch to like Liu Che. I don't think that's going to happen, okay? But I am looking forward to the sort of next commanders that are coming to the game. And you should subscribe if you want to see exactly how Philip's going to do, because I'm working on Echelon now. I'm going to try to get the legendary inscriptions if it's looking good and like, oh yeah, this is going to be really busted. And we'll see what I can do with it. And if it's really powerful, that's going to be pretty hype. I do think, I'll say before I close out the video, that I don't think this brings Trajan back to the forefront. I don't think they're supposed to be paired together, okay? I think maybe you pair with a big damage dealer like Ragnar, but I covered that in a separate video, all right? If you enjoyed this one, throw a like on here, subscribe to the channel. Big thank you again to Star Trek Fleet Command for sponsoring today's video. You check the link in the description if you want to go download the game. And until next time, you have fun smashing your enemies. Take care, everybody.